Welcome to Rustic Meals. My name is Beau Shell and I'm the executive chef here at historic Fort Gibraltar in St. Boniface, Winnipeg. With Festival du Voyageur just around the corner, we've come up with some delicious recipes for you to cook at home or even over the fire. We'll start with fève au lard, which is a classic French-Canadian baked bean. We'll accompany that with some bannock, and then we'll finish our meal with a delicious sticky pudding chômeur for dessert. Then we'll go and visit Sean in the partner's room, where we'll find out what he has to accompany our rustic meal today. Let's get started on our baked beans. First thing we need to do is cut up our bacon. We smoke this bacon in-house, so it's smoked for about 4 hours at 150 degrees with hickory wood. You want to cut up your bacon relatively chunky so that you have something to chew on while you're eating the baked beans. The reason why you want to put bacon in your baked beans is because it's going to give you this nice smoky flavor that you can only get from bacon, really. Now that we got our bacon cut up, we're going to get the onions into the pot and sweat them down a little bit. Then we're going to add our bacon, and we're going to allow that to just cook down and let some of the fat come out of the bacon. It's going to add flavor to our baked beans. So we've already diced up our onions for our fève au lard. We want to give them a relatively fine dice, because what's going to happen is the onion's going to melt down into the sauce of the baked beans. We really don't want chunky onions in there. We just want them nice and fine so that when we cook it for the long period of time that we're going to, they melt throughout the entire sauce. We're just going to move our ingredients closer to the fire, and then we'll get started on our baked beans. Okay, we're going to start our baked beans with a little bit of oil in the bottom of our pan. We're going to add our onions. We're going to cook down the onions a little bit here. The reason why we want to cook down our onions is so that they're nice and soft. We don't want them to brown any though. We really just want to sweat them out. So give your pot a little bit of a stir. We'll give that about a minute. Now we can add our bacon. Now we're going to add our tomato paste and Dijon mustard. The reason why we want to do this, we're going to start to build our sauce now. Give it a little bit of a stir. Now we can get our molasses in there. Make sure we scrape out that bowl as much as we can. The molasses is going to give you this nice richness to the dish. Give it a stir again. And our maple syrup. This is a Quebec maple syrup. Just delicious. We can add our roasted garlic. We pre-roasted this. I always have roasted garlic in my fridge at home. Just a good ingredient to have around. And then our baked beans, or our beans. Give it a stir. And we're just going to finish this off with a little bit of seasoning. So our seasoning mixture consists of cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, coriander, and black pepper. We're going to let that cook down for about 45 minutes so we can melt our onions and soften the bacon in there. In the meantime, we're going to go up to the partner's room and see what Sean has to accompany our rustic meal.
Welcome to Rustic Meals. I'm Sean Branson, owner and the drink guy for Rustic Meals. I just want to make you a nice little cocktail today. It's called a Grand Champagne Cocktail. Spin on a traditional champagne cocktail, but we're going to be doing a couple of different unique ingredients for the cocktail. Champagne cocktail is a great cocktail that can work with a variety of foods. It can work with fish, hors d'oeuvres, that sort of thing. But what we're going to do is make it, put a little spin on it. So first ingredient, which is the main ingredient, is champagne. Champagne comes from the Champagne region of France. If it's called champagne, it has to come from that region. Generally, it's grapes, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, grown in the Champagne region. They usually crush them and press them separately so they can blend it together at the final assembly. So the way it's made is they take the wine and they put it in the bottle. Then they add a little bit of fresh grape must, which is basically grape juice, which is already crushed, into the bottle. And the sugars start getting eaten away by the yeast and turned into alcohol. And then it starts causing the secondary fermentation inside the bottle. One of the byproducts of fermentation is carbon dioxide. And so what happens is the carbon dioxide stays inside the bottle because they usually have a cap and it holds it inside the bottle. So in Champagne region of France, which we have a champagne right here, this is the Louis Rodier Brut Premier. This is a combination of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. They put it inside the bottle. The difference is that this is now moved into these caves, these underground caves of champagne. There's people down there, they're taking care of the bottles, they're on an angle, they're turning them a quarter turn, taking care of these bottles to turn it into champagne. So you can only call it champagne if it comes from the Champagne region of France. In other areas of the world, such as our second bottle, which is Mum's Napa Prestige, owned by a champagne house, made in Napa Valley, California. Same procedures, they don't have these deep dark caves like they do in Champagne, but they are held on the side and more of a machine method kind of thing. And then finally we have the Jacob's Creek, which is a blend of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. This is made very similar in the way they make champagne, but the difference is in Australia, hotter climate, so what they want to do is pick the grapes younger, so they're full of acidity, and then they basically put it inside the bottle, totally done by machines. All these grapes, though, are hand harvested. The difference is the Jacob's Creek, they'll harvest it all, put it in barrels, taste the barrels and blend it. In the Rodier estates and in France, they actually pick each individual vine or rows of vines and keep them separate, and they taste them every day and figure out what works good in that blend. So champagne is basically, and sparkling wine is wine that's still, first turned into wine, add it to the bottle, dosage goes in, it's now in a secondary fermentation. The only difference is during fermentation, the bubbles are trapped in the bottle. Next, we're going to talk about bitters, which is the next ingredient. Bitters is something that was developed in 1824 in Angostura, Venezuela by Dr. Schigel. And originally it was designed to cure seasickness and stomach ailments. But what we find in cooking and in cocktails is that it's a flavor enhancer. It actually takes some of the acidity away from things. There's also a new bitters and new flavors of bitters. This one right here, we have cranberry bitter, which is made in the US. So they have these little custom bitters that work good with your cocktails and ingredients. So what we'll do is we'll start creating this Grand Champagne cocktail by grabbing a glass, a nice clean glass. And then we want a sugar cube. So these are little this is plantation sugar. It's a raw sugar product. Some of the white sugar is more refined and that sort of thing, so we're using more of a rustic one. And we're going to use the cranberry bitters for this. What we do is we just do three dashes. 1, 2, 3 of the bitters right on the sugar cube. Next, what we want to do is we want to add the orange brandy. So this is Grand Marnier. It's a orange brandy mixture, and basically traditionally you'd use brandy in a champagne cocktail, but we're going to give it a bit of an orange matching with the cranberry, and we just want to put it to the top of the sugar cube. Next, we're going to add the sparkling wine. So we're just going to open that up. So we're just turning the cage. There's a metal cage here. We just turned it 12 times. And we slowly move it. So what you want to do is you want to twist the cork. So what we wanted to do is when you're moving the cork back and forth, you just want to move it back and forth, and the pressure pushing from the bottle will actually move it and pop it out like it did. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to pour the sparkling wine inside. Just wait for the bubbles to subside, and we top it up. So this is the Grand Champagne cocktail. It's a great cocktail to have by itself or also to pair with food. It works well with mussels, shellfish, things with a bit of citrus. It also works good with deep fried foods, hors d'oeuvre parties, baked or deep fried fish would work quite well with that. So this also would work quite well with the bannock that Bo is cooking. So let's go back to Bo and see what he has cooking.
Now we're going to make some bannock as an accompaniment for our baked beans. Bannock is a staple in the Métis culture. It's a North American leavened flatbread. We're going to start with our dry ingredients: flour, salt, pinch of sugar, baking powder for leavening. Now give that a little bit of a mix just to combine the ingredients. Pepper for seasoning. And now we can add our wet ingredients: water and melted butter. Now give that a little bit of a mix. This will yield a nice fluffy soft dough for you. What the butter is going to allow is for air pockets to form in the bread. So don't be afraid to get your hands in there and knead the dough. You just want to make sure that everything's mixed in properly. You don't have any dry bits on the outside. Once the bottom of your bowl is relatively dry and there's no flour sitting around in the bottom, you know your dough is ready. Now that our dough is ready, we're going to put it into the pan. Put a little bit of oil in there just so it doesn't stick. Just rub it around a little bit. Grab your dough. And then just form it to the pan. Now the dough may look like it won't stretch to the edges, but you can get it right to the edge of the pan. If you get a hole in the dough, just push it together. They'll seal back up. Now that our dough is formed to the pan, put a little bit more oil on top. Rub it around a little bit. And just finish pushing the sides in. And our bannock's ready to go on the fire. Now we're going to let that cook for about 10 minutes on one side, give it a flip, and let it cook for about 10 minutes on the other. The bannock's almost done. We're just going to give it a flip, and it's got about 10 more minutes. We're making pudding chômeur. Pudding chômeur dates back to the Industrial Revolution, and it was invented by women factory workers. Typical ingredients were flour,
baking powder, a whole bunch of sugar, nutmeg. Give that a bit of a mix. And we're going to add our wet ingredients, milk, and melted butter. Stir that up until you have the consistency of what almost resembles a pancake batter. At this point, you can add raisins or nuts. Today I wanted to put some cranberries in there, so I got some dried cranberries, and we'll finish it off with a little bit of lemon zest. Give that a mix and then get it into your pan. Just make sure that you cover the entire base of the pan. The finishing touch is maple syrup on the top. Now, it may seem strange that you're pouring it on beforehand, but what it's going to do is it's going to caramelize in the base of the pan to give you this nice sticky pudding. Now that's ready to go on the fire. Now we're going to let that cook in the fire for about 45 minutes. If you're cooking it at home in a convection oven, about 350 degrees for about 25 minutes. Now we're going to go upstairs to the partner's room and see what Sean's doing up there.
While Beau's cooking the pudding chimère, I started thinking about wine pairings for desserts, and in that process I was thinking about 3 different styles of wines, which I want to share with you right now and talk about dessert wines in general. So the first group of wines comes from Canada. 2 bottles of ice wine. They're both Riesling, or the grapes, and a lot of the grapes that come from sort of Alsace and France work really good because they've got thicker skins that can hold on the vine. Key thing with ice wine, originally it came from Germany, and where they call it Eiswein. And 1 in 10 years they'd be able to make this Eiswein, and it was a miraculous thing. Canada decided, you know what? We could probably make ice wine, because the main thing for ice wine is that it needs to be frozen to -8 degrees or colder. We do that pretty good in Canada. And what it is the grapes are frozen in the vineyard. And what they'll do is they'll go out, they'll pick the grapes at -12, transport the grapes at -12, and crush it in their vineyard. What happens is the ice, or the water inside the grapes, turns to ice. And when they press it, this nectar comes through, and the ice is left behind with the pressings. So they get this nice nectar that they start off with that they turn into wine. In certain years where it's warmer, or they say, you know what, we want to make something that's a little bit special, but we want to actually get a harvest because we're worried that we may not be able to make ice wine, they make a late harvest wine. So there's no regulation as far as how cold it needs to get, but because it's sitting on the vines for a very long time, the grapes are sitting there, they're raisioning, they're concentrating their flavor. You get a nice concentrated flavor. In some vintages where it's warmer, here's a little trick. Buy the late vintage, late harvest in certain vintages, because you'll actually get what could have been ice wine, but not quite. It didn't make the mark. So that's the first variety, cold climate, sort of reducing the grape's characteristics and ultimately freezing and pressing. Next we come to the granddaddy of all the dessert wines, the area of Sauternes. It's in Sauternes, France, and it's a blend of Semillon and Sauvignon Blanc. And what's unique about this area, and it happens in many other places, but certainly unique to this area, is something called Botrytis cinerea, or noble rot. What it is a fungus that actually attacks the grapes. It sucks out the moisture and creates this really great reduction of flavor. And in certain vintages, there's more of Botrytis cinerea and more concentration. That's where you get the darker flavors, as well as the wine ages, it gets darker in color as any white wine would. They also make it in Australia, where they may call it Noble One, where they actually go with spray machines and spray all the grapes to make sure they get 100% inoculation. So in Australia, that's what they do. Here it's naturally occurring and there's vintage variation. The third style of wine is the Vin de Naturel, which is the one that I chose to pair with the Pudding Chamère. It's Vin de Naturel is a wine that's made in southern France, and the way they make it is they take the grapes, they dry them out on the vines, they pick them late, but then when it's just starting to ferment, as the fruit juices are being converted into alcohol, they'll actually use a pure grape spirit. Now this is a spirit that's 90% alcohol, so 190 proof, pretty strong stuff. And what that does, it brings up a high alcohol level with some fresh fruit sort of characteristics, but not quite as sweet as the ice wine and the Sauterne, which would work well with the pudding. So I'll just pour a glass of this. You can take a look at it. So it's a little bit lighter. It's not as thick and concentrated as the ice wine or the Sauterne. It's got great apricot, honey flavors and characteristics. Not as viscous, and it'll work quite well with desserts. Key to pairing wine with desserts is that the wine always has to be sweeter than the dessert. This is sweeter, but not quite as strong as an ice wine or things like that. So this is the dessert wine that I paired with Beau's dessert, the Pudding Chamère. It's a Vin de Naturel wine, so let's go back to Beau.
Today on Rustic Meals, we made a classic Quebec French baked bean, bannock, and for dessert, Pudding Chamère. Let's go upstairs to the partners' room and enjoy our rustic meal.
Rustic Meals is filmed on location at Historic Fort Gibraltar, Promenade Cafe and Wine, and Provisions at Lower Fort Garry.